It was a feeling inside. I have sold my work. I have shown before at various venues and types of venues, but it's not about the selling, it's about the making. I make art because it makes me laugh. It amuses me. And I'm still totally amazed at some of the things that come out of my hands. And that's how I knew I was an artist. It was like, I got this urge to build and make and do and present and decorate even sometimes. It's an urge that won't ever go away. So yes, this is what I am. I'm a creative person. My imagination never outgrew childhood, and I just fly with it. I have wanted to be an artist all my life, probably since the moment of conception, but I was not allowed to as a child. Art was paintings, beautiful paintings on the walls, and that was useless, so we couldn't do that. My grandmother taught me how to knit and crochet. She never used a pattern, neither do I. She made very intricate things. She'd just sit down and start crocheting, count in her head, and this is probably the best one she's ever done. And I actually remember her making this. So I started at the very beginning with crochet and knitting as an exercise in keeping your hands busy more than anything, and passing time and making something pretty. And doilies were in fashion because they were on every end table and chair and everything else that you could go with. So I'm very glad I have this left over from my grandmother. My mother was a very talented seamstress and dressmaker, but she never did anything by hand if she could get away with it.
She used the machine.
She used the machine. Even to sew buttons on, she would use the machine. And I much preferred doing things by hand. I love the tactile feeling of things. I like getting my hands into things. I did sew. I do well with sewing, and I don't have a machine any longer, but you know, for many, many years I made my own clothes and made many things, but I always wanted to design. So I've always had the fiber art skills. I didn't really start focusing on art as art until the early 80s when I was working on my PhD program in education. And at that point I took drawing lessons and painting lessons. I was a special education teacher, and I combined that with vocational and technical education. That just was a career path that I started on very early in life, and during a time when special education was being birthed and developing. And when I finally got done with my PhD program, I decided that I really didn't want to do that. I had never really wanted to do that. It was just sort of you get going, and you just keep going. And I had always wanted to do art, and I just said, well, you know, I'm not going to wait till I'm dead before I make art. So I just started filtering it in as much as I could, and so it was just a very slow progression over the course of my life until I finally got to the place where I could say, yep, I'm an artist. I call myself, for most of my life, a mixed media artist. Mm-hmm. More lately, I'm focusing specifically on fiber art and sculptural pieces. So I would call myself a fiber artist now. I learned through painting how to work with composition and color and perspective, and got a sense of what I wanted to say and what I wanted to present to the world. I want things to jump off the walls. And that's sort of what I was so disappointed about with painting. As good a composition as I could put together, as much texture as I could put with impasto and all these other techniques, it was still flat. It's still visually flat to look at. So if I take something which is flat and then add some beads to it or add a very textured fiber to it, it gives it dimension. And then when you go into something that's more three-dimensional, then it really does come off the wall. It really does come at you and challenge you to look at it. Mm-hmm. And I like sculpture. I have worked with clay and building with paper and wood and doing large projects and paper mache, and that's not really what I want to do either. But I can do it with fiber because I know how fabric works. It's just in my bones. Fibers are soft and they're comforting. And for a nervous system that's been jangled a lot during my lifetime, it's just fun. It's just fun to hold and cuddle and see what the different textures are going to be like. You learn a lot about how fabric fits together and pieces together and drapes, and watch where the stress points are, knowing how to highlight those and emphasize those, work around the weak points in a fabric. It's very pliable and flexible, and you can do lots and lots of things with it. So the fiber art and the sculpture, it's just taking all these different media and bringing them back around. And the art was part of it, because as you wander and you really pay attention to other things around you and life around you, there's so much beauty in the world. And I just wanted to immerse myself in that. And a way to immerse yourself in that is through art. So I can immerse myself in letting my fingers wander through this texture and this memory and that memory and this experience, that experience. And as they all get woven together, which is where the weaving comes from, as they all get woven together, you know, my mind is going all over the place still. And the experimentation and the curiosity, the insatiable curiosity that I've always had, is here with me every day now, and I can just have fun with that. What I'll do is I'll go to my yarn bucket and I'll open it up. This color attracts me today, so I'll pick a color, and then I'll pick colors that will complement it. Sometimes I'll limit my palette because I'll want that challenge. Sometimes I can let it be a rainbow color and make with, you know, block patterns or blocks of color next to each other or whatever. So I always start with a color. To me, color is just fun. It's just there, just out there in the world for you to soak up all the time. And color is very emotional, and I don't need to name it like some other people did, but I do like the way they combined yellows and reds and shades and gradations of colors. I would go through times when I would do monochromatics, and other times go through you know, more of a crazy quilt kind of a thing. I might build something out of wire or wood that would be on the inside of a piece. I prefer that my pieces are all soft and freestanding without supports, internal supports, but sometimes I need them. Once in a while I'll start with like a string of beads, then crochet onto them, and then attach a weaving onto them. And throughout this process I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing. It's very organic. Well, on this piece that I'm working on here, I started out on the loom and just made a very long strip of just weaving, just plain weaving. And that was a rigid heddle loom. And then take a crochet hook and fold strips this way and this way. Well, you make a loop that way. So you take a crochet hook and you can go and make a form within it, You have loops on either side, you just fill them in. You do so many different things with it and come out with so many different shapes. And then on the back there's a little ridge here, so it could be a fin later on. Tails. It gets to a point where the crochet is really the shaping force for anything. I particularly don't like to knit, so I don't use knitting very much, but crochet is much sort of like my standby.
Is weaving just a component of getting to the end, or is it sometimes where you start?
It's both.
It's both?
It's both. Sometimes I'll start with, I have one piece that I started crocheting just a giant circle, because I had a ton of this yarn. That was really the only reason why. And then I started crocheting a kind of rays off of it. And then you fold it together and it ends up being a whole crochet piece. Whereas this one here, for example, started out as just a weaving project. I wanted to try this particular thread with something else because it's variegated and has different textures within it, with something a little bit more smooth, the colors, that's all. This one up here started out just as a weaving. Let's try this. And so it was a big rectangle, about 18 by 40. And mistakes aren't a problem. That just adds to the character of the whole thing. Putting in beads that seem to fit it. And at the time, I think I was watching YouTube videos about Tudor England. And so they had turbans and that kind of look. This is a weaving that started out on a peg loom with some jute, which is a very different kind of fiber than the soft cottons and wools. And with the jute as the warp, which is the vertical lengths of the weaving, then you can weave in different textures. So this is actually shredded paper that came in strips with some a variegated nubby kind of yarn put in there. And then all it was a square. Well, you take a square and you fold it in different ways, and you end up with, oh, there's something there, and it's like a wolf shape maybe. Well, if I just bound the nose together, make a nose. And then the rest of it kind of falls into place with the beads and buttons. Add style to it, it adds expression to it, it adds a little bit of a flair, and when it's all done, you take it and you just fluff it up, and when that was all done, it was like wildebeest. This is a wildebeest. I don't remember if I've ever seen a wildebeest in real life, but then I looked it up online and I saw it does actually look like a wildebeest. That amazes me, that you can just, that the things come out that way. When I'm working, I often think of children. What would a child think of this? How would a child look at this? So in a sense, I'm always talking to that little child inside of me. So it's a running conversation. And when you're having a running conversation with yourself or somebody else, it's difficult to stay in the abstract. It's easier to come out with something that's a little bit more identifiable. I much prefer natural fibers, cotton and wool. Cotton kind of has a soapy feel to it, and I love the way it just slides. And the tensile strength of it is very strong in most cases. Wool has very diverse tensile strengths depending on the spin and the weave of the fiber itself. And when you sit down to weave on a loom, for example, or you sit down to crochet, you have to kind of get into the rhythm of it because each one handles differently. And that's all part of the fun of experimenting because, yes, there are things that come out differently, handles differently than what I had expected. And then that just works into whatever it is I'm making. Hemp and jute, both, they're rough on your hands, and they have different purposes. If I go back to my wildebeest again, they hold their shape. They hold their bounce to them. rather than actually weaving hemp on hemp, which would get stuck and be frustrating because it's all rough, just use it in a different way.
It's more an independent.
It's more of a, if you could imagine macrame mixed with a fiber hanging, it's kind of like that. You know, if I'm doing a tapestry and I want a really sandpapery look through one of my strands, then I'll use hemp or jute. But it's very short-lived. To sit and crochet with jute, oh boy, your hands are all chewed up after that, so you don't want to do that. I'll use a mix. I'll use a blend of a natural and a synthetic, and I have used the Joker over here is all synthetic, but it's not my favorite. It's not as human as natural fabrics are. Oh, it comes from everywhere. I buy some. The Web store in Northampton is a great resource to have close by. Salvation Army and other thrift stores are good. You have to just be careful not to buy something that's too old, because when thread is old, it breaks very easily, and that's not good for weaving or crocheting for that matter. Some of my neighbors supply me with little doodads, like the little buttons here that I got on this little guy. They came my way somehow. I don't really know how. I go to thrift stores myself on occasion, but a lot of times things just happen along. The personality develops as it goes along, and this one has I've been working on this for a couple of weeks. So it changes, you know, from day to day, from week to week, that my moods go into it. So by the time it's all done, it has its own personality. It's not my personality anymore, it's its own personality. And then once it's all put together, what I love about fiber art and making figures is that they have a life of their own after that. They have their own character to them. They have their own conversations going on in their own minds. They have their own substance. And being fiber, they'll sag with time. Humidity will change the shape of them slightly. So they really do have a life of their own. They really do live and continue on in that evolutionary, organic sort of way of being. I remember doing a lot of bus trips, and I would take a sketchbook with me, and bus stations are wonderful for watching people. There's so many different shapes and sizes and colors and textures and expressions in people's faces, and I would sit there and I would just kind of sketch out that nose, or or put it in a different face. But I never did a portrait of any of those people. I would piece together bits and pieces of different features and put that together. It's always been that way. For me, it's the expression, the gesture, and the implications and the intimations of what's underneath. And when you put work out into the world and do a show that's about expression and gesture, it gives permission to other people to appreciate that they also have those emotions. They're not masked at all. They're their very own integritous sort of personality. It's a character. Mm-hmm. And after studying people for all my life and watching them and observing them, and they're all in me. They're all been absorbed in me somehow. Is there any kind of emotion that I haven't seen? I don't think so. And to have them come out in their own way and in their own person is it keeps me alive. I would say just play. Being an adult is an extremely serious endeavor. You get up in the morning, you shower, you dress, how are you? I'm fine, everything's good. You go to work, you come home again, you eat. It's very serious, it's very regimented, it's very rigid in many ways. And as you grow older, you play less and less and less, or you play in certain defined areas, like you can play sports, you can play card games, you can play trivia, or whatever, but you don't play in that impulsive, spontaneous, experimental way that children do. And so tap into your own child again. Well, what would you do if you had finger paints? And you had a whole afternoon of nothing but finger paints in front of you. And it's taking a risk, but it's a good risk. It's one that you really can't fail at, because if you're just playing, how can you make a mistake? And if you're just playing, you can't do anything wrong. Yeah, you might write on the walls, but it washes off. There's always a way to dive into something that you've never tried before, and so, I wonder what this would be like, or something that you're used to doing, but let's do it a different way. Here's a big long strip of just a piece of fabric. Well, what if I twist it? Well, that makes a different kind of shape than if I were to fold it and make a square out of it, or make a domino pattern this way. You can tie them together. You can make knots. You just sit there and you just play and see what comes out. And don't be afraid of what it is, because there is no set rule about it. And so here I'm making a chain, and as you make a chain, well, then now you have opportunities to fill in spaces. You have an opportunity to weave things through them. You have an opportunity to just kind of make a belt out of it if you wanted to. It doesn't have to be anything like super creative that can go in a gallery. It's just something different than you would normally do, just because. And to always, always, always remember that if you stitch something, you can unstitch it. There are no rules that you have to get stuck in all the time. And you may want to, if somebody's interested in doing fiber art or doing some weaving, start out with something very simple and just slowly add in a little bit more and a little bit more, and try this, try that. Look at how other people do things. Take classes if that works for you. Use a kit. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. We moved to Western Mass in the 80s, mid to late 80s, and I did shows at all the different hot spots in town, the different libraries, the Jones Library, the Forbes Library, the Book Mill, the Montague Book Mill. I did several shows there because I lived in Montague Center. At that time, it was mostly paintings and drawings. And then I moved away, and I was in Canada for 10 years. I did a lot of textile and beading, wall hangings and tapestries at one time in the early 2000s, and those did get shown in Canada, but not around here. And coming back to the States, back into this area again, I did mostly craft fairs, because I was making miniature fiber sculptures and faces. Those could be sold at craft fairs, because craft fairs you have to keep your price down if you want to sell anything. And again, I was interested in the selling as much as I was just showing people that I can make fun little happy things and quirky little things. So I did that for a number of years, and then I was in a group installation in Northampton in 2016 or 17 with the refugee crisis as a theme, and so I did 2 installation pieces for that particular group show. This is the first solo exhibit I've had for a very long time. And I just feel like it's time again. There's a certain place, even though I've always felt like an artist, I feel like I've matured now. And I feel like I'm working in the media that fits my personality, fits my skill levels, fits my my comfort zone. And in that maturity, it's time to go back out into the world and to let my creatures go back out into the world too. Mostly it's part of giving the piece a life of its own. There's no reason why my wildebeest and my joker and my tassel vassal should stay in my room all to myself. They're their own personalities now. Let them be themselves. And to show that to the world and have other people interact with them actually makes a difference. People often tell me they want to touch my work. Go right ahead. Yes, you're going to get oil and dirt on the pieces, but I can't control that all the time. Why should I control that all the time? So it's putting it out into the world. It's putting it out there for them to live and be themselves. And if somebody wants to pay me money to take it home, fine. And if they don't, fine. That's not the purpose at all for me. I love to watch people's faces when they see it. I like to see their reactions. And I watch my neighbors in the house here as they look at things, and some do double takes, and some look at them for a very, very long time. It's just like any other art show. Some people look to see how it's made. Oh, I could do that. Oh, I can't do that. People have the reactions they have. I can't do anything about that. It's just fun to watch. I would hope that it restores some hope in human nature, that we can be also different and also beautiful and also full of life and expression, that we don't have to be embarrassed about it anymore. And we don't have to stay in rigid gender roles, for example, or racial roles, or any of those other isms that are out there in the world right now. It gives us hope, because there's still more life underneath everything. And as you think about a newborn baby in your hands, and the expression that that little baby puts on that little face and reaches out with the finger to grab your little baby pinky finger. When you see a little baby like that and you hold one for the very first time, what's your major feeling? It's this unconditional love and hope and faith in the world and what life has to bring to us. And if I can bring a character into the world that has can just pick at that and chip away at some of those shields we've put up on ourselves, bring us back to that very visceral love and hope and faith that we have in the world and in ourselves, then I think that's a useful contribution to the world. I need my imagination. I need my creativity. I need that to be an equal partner with my academic training, with my mechanical abilities, with my skill sets. I need that, and we all do.